Welcome to the Monopath podcast. I'm speaking with Joe Rawlinson today, who is the head chandler at Worship the Scent. If you're not quite sure what a chandler is, or if you only recognise the word from a popular American sitcom, well, I'm sure you're not alone. I have only just learnt this myself. A chandler is a candle maker. And so Joe is a chandler who makes vegan candles and wax melts. And so we get into some of the processes that one should expect when they are a chandler. And though my interest was primarily on fragrance and scent, and I think those are probably the areas of uniqueness for a candle maker, which means you could expect more questions that concern the specifics of Joe's fragrances rather than the commonalities between him and other candle makers. Aside from that, we unexpectedly stumbled into the topic of colour. Joe is colourblind, which made a strident contrast against myself, somebody who experiences some unusual feeling of colour when I hear music. So we explore that comparison. There were a few issues with audio which you might pick up on as you're listening. Some connectivity issues at both of our ends. Needless to say, the conversation still seemed worth doing something with. You can tell me if you think that is the wrong decision, and I'm sure you will. One final thing I find myself obliged to mention is that if you want to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is either by visiting my website, which is arthurjohndove.com, and clicking on the Support Me tab. The other way is to simply share this with somebody who you think would gain something from listening to it. That will do. Anyway, let's get to it. Well, Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm not going to have too many opportunities to speak to candle makers, I don't think. What would be the... I don't really know what the appropriate way to describe you is. What is the job title?
There is actually a professional term. I didn't know this either until making my website look a bit more professional. But apparently, a person who makes candles is called a chandler. Apparently. I don't know if that's correct. Maybe my research is terrible. Probably the latter of that. However, I believe a chandler is the more logistical and expert name for candle maker.
So you also make wax melts as well. Does a chandler cover wax melts as well, or is it limited to candles?
That's a very good question. And sadly, I am, again, not a great expert on logistical knowledge, but I will get back to you whether or not. We'll say it is. Why not? Why not? I am a chandler of both candles and wax melts.
That will sound impressive in any description, I think. I've been sticking with candle maker, candle designer. I'm not really sure. Although I think there's a better way to describe the job, maybe, because you really are somebody who deals with smell and scent more than anything else. So I'm less interested in the wax and the candle and the material components of what you do, and I'm a little more interested in your taste and how you develop a product based on that. Maybe before we get into that, it might just be maybe it's just worth saying something about who you are, what you do.
Perfect. In terms of what I do, who I am, so I am Joe. I'm also known as head chandler, we're going to use that word, of Worship the Scent, which is a vegan brand-based product who we supply to candles and wax melts it's more of a product refreshing than any direct product source to the website. And we refresh product every Friday onto our website. And it's that basically. I have help from my significant other, who is Inktinkboy, or called Storm. And he comes up with the physical designs for products, where I come up with and concoct different perfumes and fragrances for the actual products themselves.
So Storm was on the podcast a few weeks ago.
So hopefully the people that are listening, hopefully they've listened to that one first.
Let's talk about some of those things then. Maybe in the order that you mentioned them. One of the first things you got to was about veganism in candle making. What is the distinction there between a vegan candle and a non-vegan candle?
That's a very good question. Most people will probably not give it a thought whether or not a candle is vegan. However, there's many different things that make it vegan. So, for example, a few things that we always have to check. Wax is the big one. We use soy wax, which is a soy blend. Commonly, the alternative that's not vegan is the beeswax. So you'll probably see that quite frequently as well. It does tend to have a bit of a different fragrance to it, almost like a pungent fragrance. I don't know how to describe beeswax. However, beeswax is used as well. We don't use that. Also, you can get wicks. We have to obviously buy our wicks. They can either be coated in that particular beeswax or coated in a soy wax. We have to be careful with that too. And it goes all the way down to using different types of glue as well. Or adhesives that stick the wax to the actual, not the wax, sorry, the wick to the base of the candle. And then usually the final bits that also need to be vegan are the fragrances as well, who we actually get most of our fragrances now from a small independent fragrance website. And they supply most of our brand new fragrances that we're releasing shortly, which is very exciting. But a lot of things that are to do with the candle overall make it vegan. However, we have to go the extra mile to make sure that they are truly vegan.
Speaking of the extra mile then, that is more than you would have to do. It's not strictly essential. So what is it that makes you come to the decision that that is the right thing to do?
We think, well, me and Storm together believe that if we wanted the longevity of a company and as well as product to have something that people want, is to make it as open as possible to as many different genres of people can possibly have it. The last thing that we would want to do is to put ourselves in a box and say that this product is only for certain people. Instead, worship is for anyone who wants it. Anyone can have it. It's accessible for everyone. And that was really, really important to us when we started. And it's something that we obviously continue to have.
Yeah, I think it's important for anybody really doing anything, whether it's writing music or beginning with a tea company or doing design work. I think you've got to have principles and you've got to have your own philosophy about what's important to you. You've got to have that figured out.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, if you haven't spent the time working out what it is you actually believe in and what you feel is important and kind of arranging that into a hierarchy of values, then you tend to end up doing the wrong thing sometimes that actually goes against your values because you haven't done it. Do you find that you have thought deeply about what it is you want to do and why on all levels of the business, or is it just that one?
At the end of the day, we want this company to be something that's around for a while, for a long time. It's not something that we cook up and expect it to be here for a few weeks. I want that real longevity for it to stand and hopefully in the future to continue worship. So hopefully I've rambled. I'm unsure of what I've said. However, I stick with it.
Part of the way that the company works is that you refresh the products. So they're all made fresh every week. And then they go on the website and people can buy them. So it's not fully stocked constantly. It's limited stock. You're an independent business. Well, that's just a few of the things. Do they all mean something to you? Is there a deeper choice going on there, say, for why you refresh the ingredients? Is there something that ties into a deeper philosophy, or is it just kind of happenstance?
I think it's a bit of a mixture, to be fair. In terms of the freshness of them, it's a bit of a dual-sided thing for us is that we often like to spend a lot of time on a product. It's not necessary that we can spend like days and days just batching out lots and lots of candles to be popped onto the website, or same with the wax melts. We'd prefer to spend a lot of time on one set batch, make sure that they are absolutely perfect up to the standard that we want, and then pop them on the website so people can enjoy them. Also, I kind of like the idea of people having something that not necessarily everyone else can immediately get, that is something a little bit special, something a little bit extra for them. And that is why we choose to have a limited supply. In some cases where it's really important to us, we do create larger batches and we do spend more time on them. For example, the one that's coming out next week is like a full charity product. So we obviously want to make as many of those as we possibly can to support the charities that we've chosen. But at the end of it, I do believe that both factors come into it.
I would definitely like to get into the ethics side of that, because that's another principle maybe that you have there. Why is it that you, as a candle manufacturer, as a chandler, are doing charity work? Because it's not obvious for most people that one leads to the other. Me personally, I put charity everywhere. Practically everything I've ever done with music, releasing music, I've tried to attach some charity to it. I didn't even make any money from the first singles I released. I just put up donation links for these different charities that I wanted to work with. And then with the tea company, I raise money for bees. And with the podcast, I intend to do something similar. I haven't kind of made my mind up yet on where that money will go, but I'm still making my mind up. But it doesn't follow naturally, I don't think, from one to the other. So why is that important to you? And what is it that you're doing with charity?
So I was always raised on that kind of initiative that if you can help, you should help. And that's something that we've not actually done with worship yet. It's a pretty new thing. And this is the first ever like charity thing we have done. There's been a lot of companies that I always see advertised to me on various different social platforms. For example, like yourself with the honey, which always hits me, and I'm a bit like, why aren't I doing anything to help out something that I could, especially with something that's quite small too. So, for example, one of the charities that is getting donated from the proceeds next week is an LGBTQ plus charity, which is all about legalizing gay marriage in those countries that, for some unknown reason, it's illegal to be of a gay like marriage. So that is where the proceeds of that is going to. But we want to make sure that the stuff that we invest into and the money that we're donating, so we really do believe in. So that becomes part of that for us. And hopefully with this, it has already quite a lot of interest in it. It's something that we'll be able to continue to do a bit more often. And hopefully maybe something permanent as well, like yourself, again, with the honey. Maybe we can have something that is permanent and really important to us. Hopefully something quite local as well. I like the idea that the funds that we raise will go somewhere local and impactful to us.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same way about that. I'm not exactly under the impression that I'm going to be raising thousands of pounds through selling honey, but that's kind of not the point. It is more to do with the fact that because I can do it, I should. It's a personal philosophy for me that I've spoken about for quite some time to people whenever they've asked why I do the things that I do. I just think if I can do something, and I notice that I can do something, that's usually a good reason. It's reason enough to do it, and that can be something as arbitrary as making the bed in the morning. If I can do it and I could have done it, then I should have done it, and so I'll go do it, and I won't. I can't almost allow myself to get away from it. An example of this is last night. I was going to bed, and I'd realised that I'd forgotten to brush my teeth. This is how arbitrary it is sometimes. And I thought, nope, it's too late. Dee's in bed now. It's time to just go to bed. And I'd already started walking away, and I was like, can't do it. And I walked all the way to my bedroom, got to the foot of my bed, and I couldn't, because I know that I could have brushed my teeth, and I know that I should have. So I have to. So I went back and brushed my teeth anyway. But that's the same principle that I really apply to most things that I do when it comes to charity. I have to do something, because I do have principles and I do care. And I'm not the sort of person who just says something and just speaks and thinks that's enough. Like I have to put my money where my mouth is and do something. And as I say, it's not really about changing the world because I've made the most money for charity through doing something like that. It's more the signal it sends to other people and the way that it makes me feel. I feel like I should do that. And so I do it. And I feel like, okay, well, I've done something good then. That's good enough for me. And if it's reaching somebody, even like you mentioned that you'd seen about what I do with the honey. The fact that you would see that or anybody would see that and go, do you know what? I, as a business owner, or me as a person who doesn't own a business, is just doing something completely different. The fact that I can do something, well, maybe I should. That means a lot to me. Um, do you feel, does that sort of thing resonate with you in similar ways, or is there something different going on for you?
I 100% see it from the same perspective. I think I always think, and I put it on the promotional advertisement for next week's release, is that you have to, if you want to see the change, you have to actively make changes yourself. And even if it is just small contributions, we both have a substantial amount of people that follow us both. Yeah, it's not thousands, it's not hundreds of thousands, but whatever we are saying and whatever we are putting out, people are listening to. People hear our voice and want to help the things that we are helping at the same time. So even actively speaking about a charity brings forth some kind of help for them, even if it's not just a monetary growth for them. So hopefully with that, the three charities that we've chosen will get a little bit of growth out of it.
Yeah. How important do you think it is to work for a charity that you actually really do care about? The reason I ask is because I find myself sometimes quite skeptical of some organizations, not just companies, but organizations more generally, or individuals too, who seem to promote charities or movements that I don't know if they strictly believe in. It sometimes feel a bit plastic. It feels a bit fake, and I don't feel
Yeah,
like they're doing it for the same reasons that I would do things. I'm promoting something quite narrow and obscure most of the time. Not everybody's fundraising for bees and the particular charities, the two charities that I happen to be raising them for, and I always have that because I quite have a I have my own view of things. Sometimes it just seems a bit empty when some of these businesses promote something, say that's more popular. Um, it just doesn't seem there's something there that, although it's a good thing for them to do the charity work, it just doesn't sit with me. So to return that to the question, how important is it for you to care about the charities that you work with?
I think it's one of the most important parts of working with a charity. If, for example, whenever I buy a charity product or I see someone in the middle of the street with like a bucket for a specific charity, not only do I invest in that charity, I invest in the person that's doing it as well. I want to
Mhm.
believe that they wholeheartedly want to support that charity, they want to see change. And if it doesn't have both of those values ticked, then I probably won't invest. I probably won't give them
Yeah.
anything. Um, I want to see that they want the change as much as I do. Um, and that's the whole reason why the charities that we have chosen to support are really important to us as people, as well as hopefully the people that we follow and the people that follow us back, and necessarily the customers. Hopefully they will support the ones that we've chosen as well.
It's a kind of tapping into a niche. It's knowing your audience as well. And I know you mentioned earlier on that part of your approach to all of this is to be as inclusive as you possibly can be. But the end consequence of that in some other way is, well, it's the same for me too, is that you do disclude other people, if that kind of makes any sense at all, because you've got these particular sets of things that I love these, and it means that well, people who aren't naturally inclined to support the same sorts of things as you are or as me say if somebody is a vegan for me, they're not likely to spend money on my honey. So I'm kind of turning them away from my company in a way. But it means I just end up having this quite narrow niche of people of an audience who do just love all of the things that I do. Um, I'm not really drawing attention to that for any particular reason other than having noticed it. But is there anything there that you would want to comment on about that kind of narrowing of audience?
No, I agree with what you're saying, absolutely. The only thing that I thought about during that was that obviously, for example, you, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, don't advertise like yourself as like completely vegan, anything like that. So I think personally for you, having a wide variety of product is still really open to many different people, because there is some people that will be able to get you tea, which I assume some of it is vegan, if not all of it. Then they can get that. It's the same for us in almost of an aspect of me being like, we wouldn't put up a charity that, for example, supports, I don't know, slaughtering of animals, something wild like that, because it doesn't come back to the product, for example. With you supporting the honey is something that you sometimes can put inside of tea. So it comes hand in hand with the products as well. And I think that is a big factor that's important when supporting a charity, that it does fit the company, it fits what brand and values and ethics that you do follow, as well as giving to them at the same time.
Well, it's funny you should mention the vegan thing too. I think it's worth me maybe making a clarification there. I've been asked a few times about whether the teas are vegan or whether they're not, or whether they're organic and whether it's not, and the same with the honey too. The reason I don't use those words on the company website or when I'm talking about any of those things at all is because largely I more or less, for the reasons that you just suggested, they don't really have anything to do with what I'm selling. Organic maybe more than the others, but vegan is not a word that has anything to do with tea. The teas are all vegan because how could they not be? They're herbs and flowers and it's tea. That you can't make that not vegan. It's vegan. So to me, if I was putting the word vegan on my website, it would be to do the thing, to commit the error that I just pointed to when organizations sometimes promote a charity just because it's a trendy thing to do. I won't do that. That seems to me, there's something repugnant to that to me. So I steer clear of it where I can. I could use the word vegan to promote my teas. It would be literally true. But there would be something there that's a bit fishy to me that I wouldn't be comfortable with. So I don't use the word. Organic is similar. Organic is a messy word. So our beekeeper, Trevor, is based over in Cleckheaton, so the side of Wakefield. And I had a conversation with him about whether the honey was organic or not. And the advice he gave me was that because honey is farmed from bees and bees roam anywhere they like, and it's very difficult to track them, you can't really say that the honey is organic because the plant life that they could have come in touch with may not have been. Even if it's an organic farm, it doesn't mean the bees have stayed there and only gone to organic flowers. You can't really say that. And with tea, it's the same sort of thing. Even though the tea could come from a plantation that's organic and they intend it to be a certain style of farming, it's land, it's nature. You can't guarantee that, say, pesticide from the farm across doesn't get caught in the breeze and end up drifting over your tea. You can't guarantee that. So for me, organic is a bit of an empty word that I don't use because I think when people do, I don't trust that they're doing it. It's not a case of I think that they're lying. It's not that at all. It's just I think the word is misleading, and the people who use it sometimes don't even realize that it means nothing. It's just not a concrete word, and so most people use it now because it's just trendy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I understand everything, especially with organic. It's something which I 100% believe people actually don't even know the generic meaning of organic. I've had a lot of people. I haven't personally had a lot, but for example, Lush is my other job, and a lot of people come in there asking, "Is everything organic?" And it's not something that the company talks about necessarily and slaps onto every single product. But I honestly don't genuinely think that people know what organic means, and they just, for the same reason that you said, they like the idea that it has it on because they believe that it will either make the product somewhat better or more desirable to them.
That's probably enough about charities and enough scene setting for people to get a good grip of what thought is going into the making of a candle company. Let's get into the nitty gritty of the process itself and the creation of things. I'm, as I said, particularly interested in your taste. So you work with scent. How is it that you come to make a candle, like a scent? How does that happen?
So there's two different ways that a fragrance is born. That's what we like to say. One is a lot of research into fragrance, into blending of specific oils. I spend a lot of my time on like different forums, investigating what essential oils blend better with others. And then there's the other side, which is where we buy in a fragrance. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes we buy our fragrance we have a small independent fragrance crafter, and they create fragrances and we buy some of them from them. So it's either one of the two. I absolutely love fragrance. I love perfumes. I love body sprays, anything to do with a fragrance. And I love trying to create brand new fragrances as well. So where we can, I do like to make most of them myself.
Maybe I can say that another way and you can tell me how right or wrong I am with it. Is it that in most cases you have all of the necessary common ingredients for the candle or the wax melt, and then the scent comes from a combination of different quantities of oils? Is that about right?
That is literally exactly it. So the same wick, the same base, the same casing for it, that's always the same. And the only ever difference for the actual fragrance is the what we actually pop in terms of essential oils or fragrance oils. Everything else remains exactly the same.
What is the role for experimentation when it comes to making the blend then? Because surely there's something there of not quite getting the quantities right and trying to balance them out and bring out different scents. Is part of the process to experiment with that a little bit, or do you go into it kind of knowing what it should be like and knowing how much to put in?
Yeah, it's a lot of experimentation for the most part. Crafting, for example, I will always have in my mad blurred brain an idea of what I would like the end fragrance to be. However, getting there can sometimes be a bit tricky. Sometimes it will go completely wrong and I'll have to scrap the idea. Or alternatively, it'll go a few different ways and it'll finally get there. Or sometimes I'll put the exact amount in that I want, and then I've got to remember how to replicate that on a larger scale. And that's where the problem comes in. That's why sometimes buying in a fragrance is a little bit easier than crafting one myself. But if you could see my notebook, it's just lots of scribbles, lots of different, me just writing different milliliters everywhere. It's got some splashings of essential oil over it as well. So it's like a perfect book of jottings.
This is probably just for more clarification then. When you buy in a fragrance, is that the job of balancing essential oils completed and delivered? Is that right?
Yeah, so if a fragrance bought in, for example, they will have crafted a perfect, almost like a recipe of an oil, and that will already be done. So we could buy a fragrance in for anything that you would imagine. So, for example, let's say we wanted a blueberry tea. Let's say, for example, we want blueberry tea as an essential oil / fragrance oil. We can then go buy that from someone who can make that exact fragrance for us, and then they would send that to us, and we won't have to do anything apart from literally mix that in, to the final product, and we don't have to add anything else to it.
Okay. That brings me to another question that follows on almost in another way from what you'd already been mentioning. You said that you usually start with some kind of vague, fuzzy idea of what it should be like in the end, what that final product will be like. And then you experiment and you kind of nudge your way getting closer to it. How is there a blend? Well, I suppose you wouldn't call it a blend, but is there a candle or a wax melt that you have that you feel got to the end or got closer to the idea in your head than others?
That's a very difficult one for sure. I would say there's a few where they've come out even better than like I've ever imagined. Sometimes when either I've bought in an oil or I mix in an oil, it can smell totally different in the final product because it's a little bit weaker, it's not as strong, and that can either completely make a product or it can completely break it in terms of, in my mind, of how I wanted that product to turn out. But for the most part, I get there. There's just been a few where I've got close to the end and it's just not been perfect. It's not been exactly what I wanted, so it's never made it to being part of a final release. But yeah.
Is there an example from the current range or candles that you've made in the past that leap to mind when you think of those that have really hit the nail on the head or others that have exceeded it?
Yeah, absolutely. There was one which is a blend by me, so it's one of my crafted ones, and it was a Christmas/Halloween one from last year, called Spice Spice Baby, and people went crazy for it. Like I was not expecting the turnout to be so impressive, and also I didn't expect the candle to smell as good as it did. And ever since that one, I've been trying to make something that goes as crazy or does just as well. And for the majority, most of the products do really, really well. However, nothing has hit as hard as that product has. And I don't know where it is about it that people love. I don't know if it's to do with the timing of the year, the smell of the product, which links it together. But I'm looking for that one product to top it yet, and there hasn't been one. But you never know. It could just turn up. It probably will. It'll probably just be one of those things where people go, this is amazing. I need 900. And I won't be prepared for it at all. But maybe that's the beauty of it. Who knows?
I think that's nice to know that you could be so surprised by which blend finally is successful. I've had the same sort of experience, to be honest, with songs that I've written and with tea blends that I've worked on. It's not usually the ones that I have the greatest faith in that do the best. In fact, quite the opposite. Usually my taste is quite specific. So, in terms of the tea, I like smoky teas, but that's not universally appreciated in the same way that I would think, given my intuitions on that. So, I have a blend called French Toast, and I love it. Absolutely gorgeous. But it's not one of the most popular ones by some distance as well. The most popular ones are like salted caramel, banana fudge. And I thought that might have been the case, but I didn't predict how wrong I could have been on that one. I wanted to tie that back into something about the environment or the environmental conditions of you making or composing a new candle, or me doing a tea. I do think there's some interesting similarities there. Is you'd said that when you made Spice Spice Baby, it may have been the time of year that made it do so well. How much do you pay attention to the time of year or the environment? I know you're doing the charity, for example, and that's likely to do with the cultural, the societal environment. But I'm thinking more about the moods of the year.
I know exactly what you mean. It is a really, really big factor in terms of how we create products. And I think it's the reason why I end up with so many for each different range that either never make it or I have to keep bringing out more. Christmas, for example, is like one where my brain goes into like overdrive and I'm thinking of all the things I enjoy
Same.
about Christmas and thinking about all the things that other people enjoy about Christmas. And I end up with maybe like 20 different ideas, and trying to narrow that down to maybe like 5 to 7 is like almost impossible. I've been trying to work on it recently, but struggling, basically. I always think of how I want to feel and how a mood and a fragrance can combine together to create an atmosphere, and how that can either change someone's mood, it can change someone's atmosphere, it can change someone's setting. It all is part of a candle, which I don't think people really like put a lot of thought into. It doesn't really occur to them that I've thought about the season, thought about the weather, thought about everything that can possibly go into burning a candle in your living room while you're watching telly. You might not have thought about all those things, but I have. I've had endless sleepless nights thinking about exactly that.
What is it that something like Spice Spice Baby is making people feel then? What kind of scene are you setting with that?
So what I always think about when it comes to Spice Spice Baby is that it is like the perfect combination of spicy, sweet, and warming all at once. And it has that exact transition from autumn to winter, which I think gets people feeling festive, it gets people feeling magical. And it does the exact same thing to me. And that was the whole reason why I loved it in the first place. And I think that's why people warm to it, not just because of the warming ingredients, but due to the fact that people want to feel something around Christmas. They want to feel like it's a different time of year, like excitement is building. And I think the essential oils that we pick and choose for that exact fragrance are the reason why people love it.
You would think as well that the reason we describe certain colours and scents as warming is because it does make us feel a certain way. Another way of saying that is that the mood comes first. It's not as if we have the words and then we just fit the mood into it. These emotions and feelings seem to be more base than just words or anything else that we're kind of gluing on top of it that seem a little bit more superficial. So I do think there's something there with different moods. I feel exactly the same about it. I have a blend coming out that actually will be out by the time this podcast is aired. It's called Moonbeam, and it's one that's supposed to be I'm thinking about a very specific time of day with that blend, and it's a sunset after a hot day. So it's quite specific, and the moon being out after. And so it makes me feel certain colors, which is purple and orange, and kind of a blend between those two. And that's almost reified by the sounds of the words. That's why it got the name Moonbeam, because the vowel sounds in moon and then in beam seem at odds with one another in the same way that purple and yellow are contrasting in the same way that day and night contrast. So it's multi-leveled. I mean, this is the kind of thought that I do put into naming the blends that I have. It's, that particular blend is designed to be had at a certain time of day for a certain kind of feeling. Has like lavender and orange, again, purple and orange in there. That's kind of the feeling that I get from it. Speaking of names, which is the final thing I think we haven't really mentioned anything about at all, you spend a lot of time thinking about quite clever names.
Thank you.
And people of the podcast might not know anything about those names. So maybe you could just rattle off a few of your favorites and say something to where those names came from and why those names instead of something else.
Yeah, absolutely. We do spend probably more time than we'd like to tell you on choosing names. They are predominantly puns more than anything else. So, for example, you've heard Spice Spice Baby. It's very similar to Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice. We've got ones like Mint to Be or We're Meant to Be. Violet, You're Turning Parma Violet, if you get the reference for that. Good one. We've got 99 Trees, but a birch ain't one. I said that correctly. Birch, the tree type, before anyone says anything. I'm trying to think of all the other ones, but my mind has gone blank on the idea and thought of it. A lot of them are to do with like pop culture, as well as puns if we are out of fresh puns. But yeah, a lot of time goes into it. It's usually a play on words for a specific ingredient. So for example, when Mint to Be, that candle has like a ridiculously like heady mint fragrance, which will just knock you off your feet. Same as exactly like Spice Spice Baby, full of cinnamon, full of almost like a nutmeg fragrance. it always relates back to the product, so you would never find it to not match, is what I'm trying to say with
It's funny
that.
for me. I don't think I've ever told you this, but do you ever have just a phrase or a word arise in your head for no particular reason at all? It's just almost plaguing you, just a word. And I don't know if you've ever had something like that, but I can't help but have that relationship with the phrase, it's meant to be. It's just there all of the time.
Incredible. That's how they usually start. It's where they all come from, little like niggles in the brain. And especially if we've got like a specific ingredient, for example, let's say, I don't know, frankincense, there will be a key word that comes to my head, and I have to have that exact word in the title, or then it's just not happening. I won't want it. I won't like it. And that's where the difficult nature comes in, because I will want exactly what I initially planned. And if it doesn't go that way, then I won't like it.
What is it about the word?
I don't know.
Is it the shape of the word, or is it the phonoaesthetics, the sound of the word? Is it how it looks in print?
I have no idea. I've not got the mental capacity in my small, tiny brain that tells me why I love the word so much. But maybe you can help me with it.
Yeah, well, it can be purely intuitional sometimes, can't it? It's just felt and then expressed. It's just got a feeling of rightness when you see or hear the thing. I suppose the question I'm asking there is really about the contents of your conscious experience. I'm asking you, when you have these senses of that's the right thing, these kind of final judgments on something you created, what are you seeing? Maybe this will make more sense if I tell you what I'm experiencing when the same thing happens for me. When it's words, for example, if I'm writing lyrics for music that I've written, or if I'm writing the description of a blend, I know that it's right when, or actually even naming a blend. So I gave the example of Moonbeam earlier. I know those things are right when it makes me feel a certain way. And I said with Moonbeam, the vowel sounds made me feel a certain color almost. So the purple and the orange, and they contrasted, and that contrast was that ran in tandem with day and night, which is what I was trying to go for, something between those two things. I liked that juxtaposition there between the two. So when I know something is right in any of those cases, because on paper, it probably looks right to me. I find that more with lyrics, and that's sometimes a hurdle. I spend quite a lot of time looking it on paper and looking at the shape of the words, and that's got to be right somehow, and using the right letters has an impact on the final thing as well. For example, I wouldn't, as I said in Moonbeam, I'm using O's in the first one and then an E and A in the second half. And, that's a dissonance that I wouldn't usually put together. As absurd as that probably sounds to most people listening to that, I resist it when I see it. The sound of the word is a completely different thing, though. The sound I'm more flexible with, because there's something about the sound of the word feeling more open and uninhibited. It doesn't need to be as locked down as a word is. A word seems very final to me. So I know if something is finished and I understand it and it's right when it's in written text. That's usually when I know it's done. When I've written it down and I'm like, yeah, that's capturing everything I wanted to say there. It's getting the feeling across, it's getting it in the right way, the shape is right, the sounds are right. I'm happy. So that's the final part for me. Hopefully that helps you to answer the question in some way, which, just to reiterate, was what's going on inside your head when you're getting to that final stage of judging the quality of something.
Mine is almost like a bit of a flip on that. So you say that you like to, obviously the ending stage is like the written bit. For me, I often get either the name first or something related to the name that sparks in my head. And then it's all about connecting the pieces to either the fragrance. Usually the colour is second, which I've got a few issues with, in case you don't know, people that listen are blind. So it does, when it comes to matching the fragrance is usually a little bit further down. That can sometimes just be because I need to blend the fragrance that matches the words for me. along down till the actual physical time of year that we release the product. Usually my final stage is the time of year. That is the thing that really hits inside of my head. A product for me, like for example, there is a few Christmas items. People have wanted me to release Spice Baby and bring it back many times throughout, like the start of the year, the middle of the year. But for me, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't hit right. Therefore, I can only ever release it at the end of the year. And that goes the same for any newer products. I've not finalized them yet because it's not that time of year. I need to be able to feel the emotions and the emotive ways that, for example, winter makes you feel or autumn makes you feel. Right now, being summertime, I can't comprehend those final bits. I could bash out maybe like 10 different summertime fragrances right now because that's how I'm feeling. I'm feeling summertime, and that feeling deep inside is what causes the final push to bring out a product. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. But yeah, that's how my brain works in bringing out products. It goes name of a product, a color pattern or a color palette to use from, the fragrance, and then the timing of year to whether or not it can become a full reality and to actually bring out.
You mentioned the hurdle there that most people won't necessarily know about you, and we can avoid that altogether if you don't want to talk about it, but you are colourblind.
I am, yeah. I have been colourblind obviously my whole life. It's not just a random sporadic thing that has happened. There is no like knowledgeable cure for like colourblindness, and it's just part of my regular life. However, sometimes when a colour is what I think it is not the colour that you would think it is. So I often get shades like blue and purple and pink confused. I get greens, yellows confused. I even get like blacks and browns and reds, like deep dark reds, sometimes confused. So that's where I have to use my beautiful other half to tell me whether or not I've got a colour scheme completely wrong. Often, actually, I have like a colour wheel printed on my desk, which helps me correlate different colours together. Even though I might not be able to completely tell the difference, it's still really, really impactful and important in the final product. So I always ask Storm for help with colours, which is quite helpful being that he designs the majority of the packaging. So it's not just one big colourful mess.
Well, I'm very sorry to ask this question because as somebody who's colourblind, you've probably been asked it 1,000 times before. But what exactly do you see that, to your understanding, is different to somebody who isn't colourblind?
That's okay. That wasn't the question I thought he was going to say. I thought the question was going to be, do you see everything in black and white? Because if someone asked me that one more time, I think something violent would have happened. In terms of like what I see, and to put it as simply as I can, I always try and describe it like this. The colours that I see are what I believe to match up in my brain to the correct colour for me. So for example, it's very hard to explain. What I will see as the colour green. So for example, anyone who's listening right now, imagine in your head the colour green. You might see, I don't know, 5 different shades of green. I can maybe see like one solid colour that I know is green. I can't differentiate the difference between like a lime green and like a fluorescent yellow. I can't really see that difference. It's just like almost like a filter. I can't see the different shades, the different deepness. Sometimes they just blur. I don't know if that will help you understand it. It's one of those things which I feel like you'd have to fully, deeply understand. I don't see anything like distorted because I don't know the difference. I've never seen the original colours or what the other colours actually look like. But yeah, does that help? Do you feel like that can make you understand or help you understand?
It does. I think most people would probably confuse that and say that, or maybe they would ask you what you already said you would get violent about, which is that all you really are experiencing is just black and white, perhaps grayscale in between it.
So what I can see, I can definitely differentiate colour. I can still see it is still there. However, my brain doesn't connect that colour to the correct name for it. is the best way that I can probably say. So you could get probably maybe 5 different items that are all yellow, for example, because I'm saying yellow because it's the color I can see in front of me, or at least the color I think it is. You could get 5 of those in front of me, and you could ask me what color they all are, and I might give you different answers for each one. I might say that 4 of them are yellow, 1 of them might be green, but that's just the different colors that I can see. It's almost like a blurred line in between different shades. So, for example, might be able to, if you aren't colorblind, you can 100% see the difference between a brown shade and a black shade. If you were to give me like a dark brown, 9 times out of 10, I would probably say it's black because I can't tell. The main reason why they knew I was colorblind when I was younger is because when I was doing drawings, because I loved drawing when I was a kid, still do. I'm not very good at it, but I still do. I would often leave a drawing, I would come back to it, and I would start using different coloured pencils and pens that didn't match up to the original that I started it with. So if that kind of helps you out a little bit in picturing it, that I often switch colours or switch colour schemes. I still do it now. I still do it, for example, if I'm on Word on the computer, or like Microsoft, and I will start in one colour. And if I'm mixing with a few different ones and I have to go back to the first colour I started on, I will often struggle to find that shade on the colour palette.
That does help. It's an unusual thing to talk about because, as you say, without directly experiencing something like that, it's almost impossible to appreciate. I can't really get my head around it.
There was one thing that I saw recently which really summed it up really, really well for me. I don't know if this will apply to you. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Apparently, some people don't have the little voice in their head that sometimes like tells them what to do. That blows my mind. And that's probably the very similar feeling that people have about colour-blindness, I assume. So maybe that helps you if you do have the little voice in your head. Maybe that helps you understand it a little bit more.
No, I think ultimately the character of being somebody else is intrinsic to them and completely unique to them. So another way of getting to what you're saying with colourblindness is that I don't know what it is like to be Joe, and you don't know what it's like to be me and how I see the world. From what I understand about me and the feedback that I get given from people routinely throughout my life is that I'm not very normal.
Wow, Darren.
Yeah, I know. But nobody can know what's going in my head and how I'm seeing the world and how I'm seeing something like a colour compared to somebody else. That's completely astounding to me. The fact that what I take for granted as, say, a plant being a certain shade of green, that there's only a vague consensus over many of those things. We recognize that there is some shade and hue and saturation of color, but there's no way of really identifying whether 2 different people are even seeing the same thing at all. That is something to me that I find a bit bonkers, frankly.
We could do like a whole episode on colourblindness. Honestly, there's so much to talk about it for sure.
I love things like that, and I hadn't really thought about getting to this, but I think it's interesting. It will add something quite to talk with you about anyway. It'll be quite valuable to people. So some people already know this about me, but I have some degree of synesthesia, which is something when you feel or sense a color, when you hear or experience some trigger from something else. And that trigger can be something verbal, it can be a sound, it can be melody, chords, music, it can be anything, smells, it can be as well. For me, it's a helpful tool in writing my music, and that's part of the way that I come to a final product, is because I know something is right when it's getting across the colors that are right, and it feels like the right color. Some people have a different version of this where they see the color and the color is literally in front of them. I think that is not how it works for me. There's just a feeling, and purple feels a certain way, red feels another way, and so on and so forth. And those colors themselves relate to words and shapes and sounds and so on, many different things. I don't know how that would make you feel. Perhaps it sits quite uncomfortable because I've got the extra color thing that you that yeah.
No, yeah.
But I mean, how
I
does
get
that make
exactly
you?
what you
How does that
mean.
make you kind of feel? Like, what would your analysis of my experience be then when I'm doing that and I'm hearing or feeling colors? I mean, is there something there that you have in common, or is it something completely alien to you?
I would definitely say the latter of those two. Like, I have no idea what that would be like in the slightest. It intrigues me 100%. I would love to be able to see that and to feel that and to emote that, but I have no connection to colours in the slightest, really. There are some colours which I like. They're pleasant colours to me, which tend to be quite dull ones. I often get told when people are like, "Oh, what's your favourite colour?" And mine genuinely tend to be like black and white, which is back on the stereotype. Love that.
Beige.
Yeah, beige, or even ridiculously like bright colours. But that's just the colours I like. They don't necessarily bring out any emotion in me. For example, if I was to pick an outfit out, I wouldn't particularly pick a colour just because it makes me feel a certain way. I would just pick the colour because it goes with what I'm wearing. But that is 100% intriguing to me. I would love to be able to feel that for sure.
There's a couple of things there then to get to. One of those is maybe my shameless self promotion, which is the tea blends are actually designed to give you that sense of color. So if you are lacking that, and if you do want to know what it's like to be me and to feel the color, then you can go and do that because I have 3 music blends of tea, and the whole intention in making those blends was that when you drink the tea and you smell it and you see the color, if you can, and you hear the music at the same time, what you're doing is you're having the same you're having the same thing in different ways. Like it's almost as if, say, with a candle, I can experience that in a number of ways. I can experience the scent, and I can experience the color of it, perhaps with the packaging that you have and the name of it. I can experience it in a number of ways. I'm only really doing the same thing with the tea blends. I'm saying, okay, there's some feeling or emotion that's central to everything, and then there's color that's trying to get at it. You can experience that feeling through color, through sound, through like music. You can taste it as well through the tea or the lyrics. There's all these different ways that you can get to this central concept. So if you are absent of the experience of color, then that would be my recommendation.
Well, funnily enough, I definitely want to talk about this right now because it's weird that you've mentioned it. But Storm, obviously, I'm going to promote you for you. Your beautiful bundles of like sample size teas are incredible. And our house has been full with the scents, and Storm's mouth has been full with the flavors. But it was actually like mind blown by the color. And feel free to correct me. I'm unsure if I know exactly which one it is. It was either Lull or the one. Is it Little Picture? I'm unsure. Which one is it that turns the color of the water or infuses the tea? Is it like an electric, like bluey purple?
Yeah, that's
Which one's
lull.
that?
That's lull.
Yeah, Lull. And me and Storm were both in the living room, and he was like fixed by the color that the tears was changed. And he was like, how incredible is that? Like, how amazing is that color? And I don't think I gave him the response that he was like pining for. I was like, yeah, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, it's cool. And he went, but look at the color. And I was like, but I can't see the color the way that you're expecting me to see it. I know that it's different than regular. I can see that. However, I'm not getting that connection that you're getting from that color. And I think that was really, really different for us. We'd never experienced anything like that. And it was weird that you mentioned it. But I wanted to bring it up and just tell you that weird scenario.
Well, I love that. So I guess this ties back in with something we mentioned earlier about the inclusivity part of what we were speaking about. And that really is what I'm trying to do there with the tea, is to be able to give somebody different ways of experiencing something I'm trying to communicate, so that you can taste or sense or see or feel or hear this central concept. So yeah, that would be my recommendation, especially for somebody like you who's colorblind, would be to get some headphones and drink the tea and listen to the music at the same time and see what effect that has on your experience and where it takes you. And that's what lull is in that sense. Let's move on from that. There were just a couple of things I wanted to ask that maybe wraps the conversation up. We've been going for a little over an hour, I think, now, which is excellent. It was to do with sense of humor. So we kind of skirted around this anyway when we were speaking about the puns and the way that you come up with naming a candle. But I think that sense of humor is there in the way that you speak on your live. So you go live on your Instagram. Is it every week you've been doing that, every Friday?
Yeah, so during lockdown, we've been trying to go every Friday, but recently it's not been as frequent, but we do advertise whenever we go live. It's usually for new product launches.
So my question is, you're putting a lot of your sense of humor in there, in the way that you speak and the way, even in the written word, you're really getting across Joe. And I love that about the company because it feels so much more personal. And I feel almost closer to the company because of that. It feels genuine. It feels authentic. Is that something you're actively trying to do? Is that another thing, one of the things, like the principles of the company, to kind of keep that personal touch in there?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to keep it as real as much as possible. There's nothing that I don't think we've ever brought out which has been fake. It's usually a collaborative piece of like our genuine sense of humor, what we find funny, which hopefully we think other people find funny. We never probably release anything that, for example, the name would be, I don't know, rose flower candle, just because it's not exciting to us. I want I suppose the actual names themselves evoke something with me, because I don't have that experience for colour. I don't get to have that thing with fragrance. Instead, I get the idea that I can have that instead, and that the names are the small thing that I enjoy the most.
It was just really about personality more than anything else, like how much of a personality should be in a product. Do you have a rule for that or a recommendation? How much of yourself goes into the final product or the business itself, if that is it can be said that is the final product too, but how much of you is in there? How much distance is there between you and Worship the Scent?
I would say they're pretty close, if not like as close as they could possibly get without it being weird. I try to stay with one cut, in terms of what I write for like the almost like the blurb on the candle, which summarizes a little bit about it. I don't spend a lot of time tweaking the words, Googling synonyms for more powerful, evocative words. Instead, it's pretty much what I'm feeling about that candle or about that fragrance is exactly what I write down immediately and exactly what goes into the final product. And there's not much tweaking when it comes to bringing in the personality. It's exactly the same with the name. Like we touched on earlier, when I've got a keyword that I really want to stick with, it's really, really important to me that it stays there and that is part of the final product, because it is predominantly about the personality of it as well.
Yeah, well, a lot of people can overthink the word choices and get quite precious about it and perfectionist about it. I definitely know that I've fallen prey to that sometimes, and I'll always return to the first idea. The first idea is the best one, and I'll go off on all of these seemingly exciting tangents that take me down all different routes toward something that ends up bearing no fruit whatsoever. And I just go back to the first thing. There's a skill there, though, isn't there? I think of being able to know. Is it a trust thing? Do you think that you just kind of trust your intuitions?
Yeah, I think so. I think because obviously we've done it for, well, it's coming up to be almost a full year. The first 4 original fragrances that we created, it was a bit like, oh, is this too much? Is this what people want? Should I be this open? Should I be this almost like genuine self and translate it through a product? Or shall I strip it back? And since those first products launched and since they were so popular, I now just connect that in my brain that is immediately what I should do. That is immediately how the products will sound from the future onwards, that they will have that genetic and generic understanding of me as a person that continues into one tiny product.
Okay, let's draw a line under that there. I feel like we could go on. There's a list of notes next to me of things that I would love to speak about. So maybe we'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
Where can people find your work online or in person?
Yeah. So there is 2 main places where you can find us. The first on Instagram, that's probably the best place to be. It's where we pop all our updates on about new products, upcoming products, live streams, etc. Or alternatively, www.worshipthescent.co.uk. No spaces, because you can't do that on a website, funnily enough. But I would definitely advise the prior and first option, because sometimes the website doesn't have any physical product on it. However, it does have our kind of story about us. So if you're intrigued a little bit more about that, check that out.
Perfect. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we leave, or have we got to everything that you had hoped to speak about?
I think that's covered many different things.
Fantastic.
But thanks for having me as well, because this is my second almost like podcast style video with you, I suppose. And it's been an honour once again, obviously.
My pleasure. Well, in that case, I'll let you get off, and thank you so much. And let's do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.